Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Today I just thought I would show you a small and easy little diorama that I started on a couple of months ago, I think, which I just finished. And this is, I used a couple of kits that I'd had laying around for a while and some materials that I had left over since I built my garage earlier this summer. And the kit we'll be using today is this mortier, this rocket, or what's it called? This mounted Panzerwerfer rocket artillery system, and with it there are some details like rockets that you can mount or not. I've decided not to use these because, as you're about to see, the plan for this diorama is to have a wrecked and abandoned mortier along the road and then a group of American soldiers just hanging out as like this is some sort of control post along the road, and these guys are manning a checkpoint of some sort, and there's going to be a small group standing around the mortier just hanging out, and then a couple of guys showing up to relieve them. So that's the plan, let's crack on. So as is common for all of my builds, I started with a piece of wood and a bit of plaster. Now I have sanded down the piece of wood, some sort of plywood that was left over, and after I sanded it, I just used an X-Acto knife and cut large slits in it, as you can see clearly on the video. That's just to give a bit more grip for when I'm going to spread this thing over. The terrain is supposed to look muddy and wet and really terrible and awful to be in, so I'm just using these tank threads to make it look like large indentation has been made in the mud on the ground, so it looks like several vehicles have been passing over. I have a spare link that I've used for all my builds when I use this technique, and it's very handy and it gives a very good result, I think. I also use some running gears from some tanks, which I know wouldn't touch the surface of the road actually, but it just gives it a bit more texture and it looks rather nice when it's done. In addition to that, I use some lorry wheels and I do the same thing here. It's just to add more texture and more details. When I'm happy with that, I take the mortier and I test fit it to see how it looks. Once the mortier has found its place, in comes the soldiers and some details, like a barrel that they can warm up around. I just try fitting them around so it looks natural, like how they would have been standing, also not trying to drop them so they take any damage. But the three of these guys look like they're standing in a sort of relaxed pose, so I'm going to use these three to be the current guards of the roadblock, and then I'm going to use the other two looking like they've just shown up and going to relieve them. Now I used one of the guys to make footprints and indentations all around, so it looks like they've been walking, and you can get some perspective of how deep the mud is at this current location. I didn't want to make this diorama particularly cluttered and I wanted to keep everything simple, but I'm going to add a few details like these wooden crates, this fuel can, and some water bottles and a bit of kit just to make this scene a bit more lived in and a bit more believable. After priming, you really get the nice details out on the soldiers and the road, and these figures just look absolutely amazing. You get the details on the gun and on their helmets, and I think this looks absolutely great. Now moving on to painting, I'm going to use a different type of olive drab and some dark green colors. I'm just going to use this a bit randomly on their trousers and on their jackets and helmets, because these men could have been sent out at different times and would have been equipped with different gear, and some of them are different grades of wet as well, at least in my mind. Now for the first time I tried on some really nice and cool things from AK Interactive, like this mud, which was absolutely great. Problem is, when the box arrived, it had been smashed and all this great mud stuff had leaked in to the box it came in. So I just tried to do the best out of the situation and use it while it was still sort of fresh-ish, which gave me a couple of problems because the diorama wasn't actually ready to pour the mud on, and none of the figures, and particularly not the Maltier, was ready. But I felt I had no other choice because this thing, once it would dry up, is absolutely useless. So I just had to salvage this as best as I could, and yeah, I did pay a price for that later on. But honestly, recommendations for AK Interactive, it's absolutely fantastic. It's a great product, but could have been packed a little bit better, at least this time. Because the mud was fresh, I had to place the Maltier into the mud before it had dried, which means it wasn't fully painted when I placed it in. This did cause me some problems afterward, and it's absolutely not recommended to stick these sort of kits into the mud before they are fully painted. I also decided that the guards coming to relieve the control post should arrive in a jeep, because who would want to walk in this mud? I also decided to test out this other product from AK, which is Wet Ground. Never tried this before either, but by the looks of it, it is perfect for what I'm trying to achieve here with my diorama. I wanted the mud to look wet and horrible and awful, and yeah, this product is perfect for that. When it came to the weathering in the Maltier, I wasn't quite sure how to do it, but I had a lot of oil paints that I haven't really used before, so I wanted to try those out. So what I started with is that I coated the entire model in a thin layer of white spirits. Not sure if this is the ideal way to do it, but I found that it gave the result that I was looking after, so here goes nothing. Let's try this thing out. What I did then was that I got some rust streaks. Also, these were stuff that I bought from AK. I never used AK before, might have mentioned that already, but I decided to try out a lot of their products on this very build. So you can look at this as sort of an AK commercial if you like. I'm not sponsored, by the way, if there was any doubt about that. First thing I did was that I covered the entire thing in rust. Immediately, wasn't very pleased about that, so I used a piece of paper and removed it, and realized I was going about this the entirely wrong way. So what I did then was getting the same product and using it on some highlight and surfaces and on every bolt along the side of the vehicle, and this gave me a result that I was much more pleased with, especially when I took another brush and tried to make some streaks out of it, and I found that gave a look that I was very pleased about. But I was also quite pleased with having used the white spirit before, because that meant that things were floating out quite nicely, as you can see here on the bonnet, or the hood. I used it on all the hinges this entire model was covered in white spirit at this point, and then I used the same rust streaks all over the kit. And where I thought that this sort of point had accumulated too much rust, I just used the broad brush which had been diluted in white spirits and diluted it, so it made it flow a little better. After that I used this product, which was a bit more a lighter rust, which I used more or less in the same point. I used it on some highlights, but this is a very bright orange, so I toned it down a bit and I diluted it quite heavily before starting pouring this thing on. But again, I think it looks absolutely stunning once it dried. Once that was done, I took a sponge which had a little tiny bit of brown paint on it, and I just used that going over the high points on the model, on all the edges and on the corners, just to make it look like it's been rusted through for longer. These areas have been more exposed, especially here on the front, and yeah, I thought it looked very good. Sorry about the text message, by the way, don't know if you heard that. I'll make sure to put my phone on silent next time I record this. I felt like I had to make it more clear that this Maltea was actually put out of action, so that it wasn't, someone wouldn't mistake it for being an American vehicle. So I decided to get a bit creative with it and realized that wouldn't it be kind of cool if this thing had been captured? So yeah, that's what I went for. Some places were in the need of a bit more rust, so I just got the brush and added a bit more. As a finishing touch, I added this frame of extra thick balsa wood around the entire diorama, and after painting it, I call it the day. So that's the diorama for today. I hope you liked it. I thought it was a really good and fun build. It's not very detailed, it's quite quick. I didn't spend too long on this, but I think it's an interesting little scene nonetheless. Hope you found it interesting and you liked the video. If you did, please give it a like, and thank you very much for watching.